Behind Buckingham Palace's gilded gates, power has always been measured in silence, and few royals have remained as defiantly silent as Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Once celebrated as a war hero, the Queen's favorite son, and a charismatic symbol of the monarchy's strength, he now stands as its most controversial survivor. His downfall seemed inevitable. Accusations, exiled duties, the stripping of titles, and a reputation scorched by one of the darkest scandals ever to reach royal walls. Yet somehow, Andrew remains living at Royal Lodge, protected by privilege and unbowed by disgrace. How did a man so publicly shamed manage to outlast the very storm that should have ended him? And what does his endurance reveal about the power, denial, and immunity that still linger inside the House of Windsor? He was born into privilege, but also into expectation. Prince Andrew, the third child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, entered the world in February 1960. From his earliest years, he was known for his charm, confidence, and striking resemblance to his father. Unlike the reserved Charles or the dutiful Anne, Andrew embodied a new, modern kind of royal daring, sociable, and unafraid of the public eye. As a young man, he became the monarchy's golden son. His service in the Royal Navy during the Falklands War in 1982 transformed him into a national hero. Newspapers called him Action Andrew. Photographs of the handsome prince in uniform graced magazine covers from London to New York. For a brief moment, he seemed the perfect balance of tradition and vitality. A royal who could make the monarchy feel alive again. His marriage to Sarah Ferguson in 1986 appeared to seal his fairy tale image. The red-haired duchess, full of energy and humor, won over the public almost instantly. Together they projected warmth, laughter, and the illusion of a happy royal family. But illusions within Buckingham Palace rarely last. Beneath the smiles and balcony waves, cracks began to appear. Even in his prime, Andrew's appetite for luxury and attention hinted at a recklessness that worried courtiers. His friendships with controversial businessmen, his taste for expensive trips, and his dismissive attitude toward protocol painted a picture of a prince enjoying the privileges of royalty without the discipline that sustained it. Still, as long as the Queen adored him, his missteps were forgiven. For decades, Andrew seemed untouchable, a man protected not by titles, but by his mother's unwavering affection. But when his royal shield was finally tested, the world would discover that Andrew's charm, once his greatest weapon, would become his greatest liability. For years, whispers surrounded the Duke of York, quiet warnings in polite circles that his judgment was flawed, his company questionable. Yet behind palace walls, few dared confront him. The Queen's affection was legendary, and Andrew knew it. His confidence, some said arrogance, grew with every unchallenged decision. It was in the early 2000s that the first real storm began to gather. His friendship with American financier Jeffrey Epstein, a man later convicted of sex crimes, was, at first, dismissed as one of many powerful connections. Epstein had influence, wealth, and access to circles that fascinated Andrew. To him, it was the currency of relevance. But in the court of public opinion, proximity to corruption is guilt by reflection. And when Epstein's empire collapsed, Andrew's world began to crumble with it. By the late 2000s, reports emerged of Andrew visiting Epstein's New York mansion after the financier's conviction. One image, the prince walking through Central Park beside Epstein, would become a defining photograph, a still frame of royal blindness. The palace initially dismissed the story as overblown, but the questions did not fade. Each denial seemed to invite another revelation. Then came the lawsuit. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's alleged victims, accused Prince Andrew of sexual assault claims he vehemently denied. She said she was trafficked to him when she was 17. He insisted the events never happened. Yet, one photographed Andrew with his arm around Giuffre's waist. Ghislaine Maxwell, smiling behind them, became impossible to erase. As the accusations mounted, the Duke's strategy was silence. For nearly a decade, the palace shielded him, relying on tradition's most powerful tool, absence. But by 2019, the pressure was suffocating. Public trust in the monarchy had begun to fracture. Newspapers ran daily headlines questioning not only Andrew's integrity, but the family's complicity in protecting him. And then, in a decision that would prove catastrophic, Prince Andrew agreed to speak. The BBC Newsnight interview aired on a cold November evening. It was meant to clear his name, to present the Duke as misunderstood and wrongly maligned. Instead, it became one of the most infamous interviews in modern royal history. Asked about his connection to Epstein, Andrew insisted he had no recollection of meeting Virginia Giuffre. When pressed about allegations of sweat during their supposed encounter, he claimed absurdly that a medical condition prevented him from perspiring at all. The moment was surreal. A prince explaining his sweat glands to the world, while the monarchy's PR machine imploded behind the scenes. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, the damage was irreversible. Within hours, clips of the interview spread across social media. Edited, mocked, dissected. The public saw not a victim of circumstance, but a man detached from reality, a royal so insulated by privilege that he could no longer recognize the absurdity of his own defense. Inside the palace, panic set in. Courtiers described the days that followed as controlled chaos. The Queen was reportedly devastated. Aides met through the night to draft statements. Within a week, Prince Andrew announced he would step back from public duties indefinitely. The statement was crafted to sound voluntary. It was anything but. That moment marked the true beginning of Andrew's exile, not from the palace grounds, but from public grace. The fallout from that single interview was immediate and merciless. Overnight, decades of royal reputation dissolved into disbelief. The Duke of York had not defended the monarchy, he had humiliated it. Within 24 hours, major sponsors withdrew their support from organizations connected to him. Universities, charities, and military units that once celebrated his patronage began to issue quiet, coordinated statements. The words varied, reviewing, reconsidering, respectfully withdrawing, but the meaning was identical. Prince Andrew had become toxic. Inside Buckingham Palace, silence replaced ceremony. Aides cleared calendars. Invitations vanished. The Queen, in her characteristic restraint, said nothing publicly. But her actions spoke louder than any statement. In January 2022, she stripped her son of all military affiliations and royal patronages. From that moment forward, he would no longer use the style His Royal Highness in any official capacity. For a monarchy built on hierarchy, that was a symbolic execution. Yet Andrew did not leave the stage. He retreated to Royal Lodge, his sprawling residence in Windsor Great Park, a mansion of more than 30 rooms, surrounded by acres of manicured lawns once tended by the Queen Mother. The contrast was jarring. A disgraced prince in exile, living amid chandeliers and history, funded by the same institution that had disowned him. Public opinion hardened. Polls showed that more than 3/4 of Britons believed he should lose his titles completely. In America, where the Epstein case carried deeper cultural weight, his name became shorthand for royal hypocrisy. Late-night hosts turned him into a punchline. Editorials questioned why a man accused of such misconduct was allowed to live under the protection of the crown and the shadow of taxpayers' money. Even his daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, faced backlash. Their weddings, once celebrated as royal joy, were now revisited with suspicion. The sins of the father, one headline read, cannot be separated from the privileges of the family. Behind palace doors, King Charles, then newly ascended to the throne, faced a dilemma that cut to the heart of monarchy itself. How does one modernize an institution still burdened by scandal and sentiment? Those close to him said he wanted Andrew gone from Royal Lodge entirely, perhaps relocated to a smaller residence. But Andrew refused. He clung to his lease, citing a 75-year agreement signed under his mother's reign. It was more than a house. It was a statement of defiance. Royal insiders described him as a man convinced that rehabilitation is inevitable. Yet each attempt at public reappearance, a church service here, a family gathering there, reignited the fury. Crowds booed. Commentators scoffed. The press called him the royal ghost of Windsor. For the Duke, every path toward redemption was blocked by the same obstacle: the truth that money and lineage could no longer erase public memory. Still, through it all, Andrew never apologized. His statements remained technical, his tone unwavering. To his critics, that was arrogance. To his defenders, it was survival, the last shield of a man who refused to admit defeat even as the palace turned its back. The question now was not whether Prince Andrew had fallen, but how far the crown was willing to fall with him. Every scandal tests the monarchy, but few have cut as deeply as Prince Andrew's. His story is not just a tale of one man's downfall. It is a mirror held up to the institution itself, exposing the fragility of power when it is inherited, not earned. For centuries, the British monarchy has survived by perfecting the art of distance. Mystery was its armor, silence its strength. But in the digital age, distance no longer protects. The walls of Windsor may be ancient, but information travels faster than tradition. And when scandal arrives, it does not knock, it floods. In Andrew's case, the flood was unstoppable. His refusal to show remorse, his insistence that the public had misunderstood him, became a portrait of privilege in denial. The palace's instinct to protect him, to delay, to defend, to deny, revealed something even more damaging. That accountability, inside royal walls, remains conditional. Observers have noted the irony. Andrew, once the embodiment of modern royal energy, has become a relic of its old arrogance. The monarchy he represented is no longer the one the public demands. In the age of transparency, the crown's greatest threat is not rebellion, but relevance. And yet, the Duke's endurance, his ability to remain in royal lodge, to keep his title of Duke of York, to maintain a life surrounded by luxury, also exposes the quiet truth of monarchy. Power in Britain may be constitutional, but privilege is personal. The monarchy cannot simply fire its own blood. It can exile, but not erase. For King Charles, the scandal has become more than a family problem. It is a question of national symbolism. Can a modern monarch preach service and humility, while his brother clings to entitlement and excess? The contrast is not merely public relations, it is philosophical. To historians, Andrew's saga marks the end of an era, the twilight of royal immunity. What once might have been hidden behind protocol and discretion is now dissected on screens, in podcasts, across social media. His story will not be remembered as an isolated disgrace, but as a turning point, the moment when the British monarchy was forced to confront its reflection and saw a face it did not recognize. Still, there are those who argue that Andrew is simply human, flawed, foolish, but not uniquely evil. They see him as a casualty of his upbringing, a man raised in a world where consequences were theoretical and forgiveness automatic. Perhaps they are right, but the public no longer distinguishes between human weakness and institutional rot. In the eyes of many, his personal fall is the monarchy's collective failure. If history has one lesson, it is that no dynasty falls in a single scandal. Decline happens slowly, one compromise, one silence, one unanswered question at a time. And in the long history of the British crown, few silences have been louder than Prince Andrew's. In the quiet corridors of Windsor, where portraits of kings and queens gaze down through centuries, the Duke of York still walks among ghosts. His life has become a paradox, one of presence without purpose, privilege without honor. He is neither fallen nor forgiven, existing in that strange royal limbo where disgrace is endured, not declared. For the monarchy, his silence lingers like an echo. It asks a question the crown cannot easily answer. How much scandal can tradition survive before it begins to crumble under its own weight? History suggests that every generation faces its reckoning. For the House of Windsor, Prince Andrew may be that reckoning. Perhaps his story is not just about guilt or innocence, but about consequence, about what happens when a system built on loyalty meets a world built on truth. In the end, every crown carries a shadow, and every silence hides a cost. What do you think? Has the monarchy truly learned from the Duke of York's downfall? Or is this just another pause before the next storm? Share your thoughts below, and stay with us as we continue to uncover the untold stories inside the royal vault.